talked to a lot of people lately that seems like they're in some kind of transition. When you are in a transition, you are especially unsure of what lies ahead. And the longer you're in this place, the drier you feel, like your soul is kind of leaking out. So God tells Abraham to leave your people and go to a new place that I will show you. And so Abraham and Sarah, they leave their home and they head out to an unknown land. Now, this part of the story is described in just a couple of verses. You know, we meet Abraham, and as soon as we meet him, God says to go, and Abraham goes, and that's really all we get in the text. And then we kind of read on for more of Abraham's story. And I find that when we're reading the Bible, it can be really easy to just gloss over that without recognizing what is really happening. Like you read it and you're like, all right, so he uprooted his life, left everything he knew, went somewhere he didn't know where he was going. Great, next verse. But when you imagine for a second him as a real person and what it took, what it meant, how he must have felt, the pressure he must have felt, all the questions he must have had, the burden of what it is to pick up your family and go. I think when we think about him that way, going on this kind of unknown journey, a journey that, he was willing to go on. It wasn't like God forced him, but certainly it was very different than the life he imagined. And so we can't underestimate what a big deal this was for him to do this, a real person going through this. And when we think about it that way, I think it helps us resonate with him when we think about what it is on this unknown journey that we're on. And so Abraham does this, and they eventually land in a place called Canaan. And by this time, they have journeyed likely over 500 miles. And at that time, we read that Abraham has another encounter with God. And this is what the Bible says. This is in Genesis 12, the chapter before the one we're going to get to. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." And so then Abraham built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to them. Okay, so Abraham goes and he gets to the land and God says to him, "It's yours." It's like God just opens up his arms, like if he has arms, I don't know if he does, but he opens up his arms and he's like, all this land is yours. And I imagine for Abraham, that must have been a really beautiful display of God's goodness in the middle of a lot of unknowns. It was as if he followed into the unknown and God met him there. And so we see a shift because at first God said, "I will show you the land." And Abraham goes. And then God says, "I will give you the land." And this is Abraham. He is following. He's walking wherever God leads, even into the uncomfortable, unknown. And God has something good for him there. And Abraham is able to receive it. All right, what happens next is that Abraham and his whole family, they keep going. They migrate all over the place. They even go down into Egypt, and eventually they come back into Canaan, where God speaks to him for a third time. And this time, God gives him some really specific instructions. This is Genesis 13. It says this. This is our key passage for our series. The Lord said to Abram, "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see, I will give you and your offspring forever. Go, walk through the length of the land, the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." Okay, so this is more than just God's generosity to give him the land. This is an invitation from God for Abraham to actually go to all the parts of the land. And this is where it gets fun when we dig into the language, like I was telling you about. See, when we read this part about how he says, look around you, look to the north and the south and the east and the west, and go walk the length and breadth of the land, there's some different ways we can look at it. Now, in the most generic sense, this might just be a fancy way for God to say what he already said, kind of reiterating, as I said before, this land is yours, just to be clear, all the land. It could be that. Or maybe if we get a little bit more specific with it, maybe looking at it geographically. What was to the north? What was to the south? What would Abraham find if he ventured into all those places? Because God tells him to go. Let's stay there for a second. Remember, he is in Canaan. So let me tell you what was in all the directions. To the north was the mountains. To the south was the desert. To the east was where they actually believed where the Garden of Eden probably would have been. So it's this idea of their origin. Their origin, the Garden of Eden, is to the east, and to the west would have been water. It would have been the Mediterranean Sea. So it could have simply meant all this different landscape is yours, from the mountains to the desert to the sea to the garden. And that's pretty cool. But there is another layer to this, because what seems like it's just directional geographies, there's an even deeper meaning when you look at the specific words that are used, that are translated north, south, east, west. And I'm going to tell you what those are. And like I said, as I do, I want you to be thinking about it. I want you to identify which of those lands resonates with you right now, where you're at right now. The first one is north. He says, look to the north. And that word that is translated as north, it also means hidden. Hidden. For ancient cultures, the idea of north and hidden often go together. They thought of the idea of the north as being dark and obscure. Some of you might feel like where you are right now is somewhere that is not clear, that you're feeling a lot of uncertainty. I've talked to a lot of people lately that seems like they're in some kind of transitioning in their career, transitioning in their schooling, maybe experiencing grief and experiencing a loss and just the transition that comes with that. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can start a transition, but I've noticed in times like that, when you are in a transition, you are especially unsure of what lies ahead. If you are somebody who's in the north, you're probably experiencing some uncertainty in your future. Now, there's others of you here that would maybe say you resonate more with the south. I told you that south of Canaan was the desert, the Negev. And that word south that's translated south, it means parched. Makes sense. It's a desert. It is dry and parched. And some of you here, spiritually speaking, would say that you feel dry and parched, that you are not feeling the life-giving presence of God like you want. That maybe he seems like he's really silent no matter how much you ask. And the longer you're in this place, the drier you feel, like your soul is kind of leaking out. When you are in the desert, what happens is you tend to go through the motions. You tend to show up at church and sing the songs and say the prayers and say the answers that you know are true, but all the while you are not feeling anything come from that. Your soul feels dry. And if that's you, then likely south is the land that you are in. And there's some of you in here that will resonate with east. East of Canaan, like I said, was where they believed the Garden of Eden was. That was humanity's origin story. This is where it all started. So it might not be surprising to you that this word that's translated as east can also mean your past, what you came from. And certainly there is sort of this communal idea, the place of where all humanity got its start. But again, if we're thinking about it like a metaphor, if we're making it personal to our own story, some of you might feel like you're in a place like this where your past is catching up with you. Maybe it's something or someone who has hurt you, or maybe you were the one that did the hurting. A mistake, sin that has come back, that maybe even feels like it never left. And what can be especially discouraging about you if you are in this land is quite often we feel like, didn't I already deal with that? Why is it back? It's right there in front of you. And if you are in East, it is even more of a temptation to just get past it because you just want to put it back where it goes. But in light of what we're talking about, could it be that God is ready to meet you right there? And he's got something for you right in the place that you're sitting with all that. And then there's others of you who would say that you are in the West. Remember, West was the sea, the water, the waves, the chaos, the noise. The word that's translated West can also be thought of as roar, because life can be really loud sometimes. If I had to pick one for myself, I would say I am in the West, in the roar. And some of it, sure, is about expectations and demands, what I feel like I need to give to people, all that kind of noise. Some of it's real. Some of it's just my own that I put on myself. But it's this noise that makes it hard to hear God, to feel God. Yesterday, I was pulling into our garage and I was in the car that has about 1.5 inches of clearance on the side before it hits the side of the garage. And as I pulled up to my house, I had my music playing really loud. And as I pulled into my driveway, I was like, I got to turn down this music or I'm not going to be able to see where I'm going. Like, it's a weird, why is that? When things are loud, it just tricks your focus. Like, you can't see. And so what happens for most of us is when we're in the roar, we try to quiet it down, like turn down our radio, but that doesn't always work when you're really there. What would it be if in the noise, in the roar, in the chaos, God met you there and was able to have something for you that you have to receive in the midst of the chaos? As you're thinking about what land you might be in, I hope that one of those resonated for you. And we think about how God told him to go. He told Abraham, go to the land. Don't be afraid of it. Go to it. And we're using that as a metaphor for us. What would it be for us to recognize we have gone there to those lands and to hear God saying to us, maybe like he did with Abraham, like there will come a time when you find yourself and the path that you go and the life that you're living, where you walk your land, where you are not where you want to be. And everything in you is wanting to get out of it. But God says to us, I still want you to go there. And you're going to find me there. What would it be if in the land where you are, you looked for God's goodness? What if you intentionally, in the midst of things you do not like and things that are uncomfortable, you sought to look for God's goodness? And it's hard to do, because when we're in places like that, we notice the lack. We notice what we don't have. But again, we have a choice of how we're going to be in that land. And so you have a choice to be looking for God's love, because your circumstance does not change God's character. Just because you are in a place that is not good, it does not disqualify you from receiving the goodness that God has for you. It is there. If you look for it, you will find it. And God says to us, I will never leave you. And so if we went to that land, then we know that God runs after us with his goodness to meet us there. And so it means that whatever land you're in, God's goodness is there with you. What would it be for you to look for it? I believe you will find it.